what do Europeans think of Donald Trump? And that's an easy one to answer. I'll do a bit of statistics in a minute, but it's easy because it's what you think of him multiplied by about 11 or 12. Europe is not amused, as Queen Victoria was not amused. And I'll tell you more about that. But I think that there is a kind of metaphor you can make with Trump, too. I think he's a sign of something portentous, something that's immense and is happening, which I see as a phase change, the way water undergoes a phase change when it changes from warm to boiling to steam. It's not water anymore, it's steam. And here we've been living in what has passed for the Enlightenment since the end of the 18th century. And America was built on the principles of the Enlightenment, as were most European countries. The one I live in now, and of which I'm now a citizen, so I have dual citizenship, which is France. It's emerged from the French Revolution, which emerged from the Enlightenment. And this is what most of us have considered really the bedrock of our values. And now I believe that this country in particular is leading a phase change towards what is now being called populism. But that's unfair, because populism was a very important force in 19th century and early 20th century America, and it led to some really good victories for the progressives and for the left. So I prefer not to call it that. I think it's leading to something which is closer to libertarianism, something which is closer to a neglect of the principles of the Enlightenment, and that is what we are moving towards. I hope I'm wrong, but I hope also that the debate can be partially, at least, based on that perception. Because it seems to me that one symbol of that is Trump's cabinet. Trump's cabinet in the secretariats of Education, Health, the Interior, Labor, the Environment, probably others, is all based on what Steve Bannon called deconstructing the administrative state. Everyone who's doing that, Mrs. DeVos is there to destroy public education. The health secretary, whose name I've forgotten, you can remind me, is there to destroy Obamacare and anything resembling public health in the sense that we understand it in Europe. The Minister of the Interior is there to sell off public land or to drill on in public land or whatever. The Secretary of Labor is fundamentally anti-union, and the environment, well, that has been made abundantly clear by leaving the Paris Agreement. So all of this is to free things up. I mean, transnational corporations haven't taken over enough yet, right? So all of this has got to be handed to the private sector and taken away from citizen control. So that's what I see happening, and it is, I hope I'm wrong once more, but I would like us to be able to reflect on that jointly. The new gifts to the transnationals have been abundant. The tax bill, this is a sign of what is happening. The withdrawal from the Paris Agreement was another one. So I'll go through the statistics very quickly to tell you what the Europeans think of Donald Trump. There was a very large survey done of the 5 largest countries in Europe, which is to say Britain is still considered a member of the European Union, Germany, France, Spain, and Italy. And one was done the week after the inauguration. And they asked for the characteristics that you would give to Donald. What do you think he is? What words are the most descriptive of Donald Trump? And the most descriptive were, for all these countries, aggressive, racist, dangerous, demagogic, however dynamic. And this was 76% for the whole number of countries taken together. And for the left, it was people who identified themselves as being progressives, as being on the left. It was 90%, 79% of workers, 84%, this is interesting, of the managerial class. They were scared of him. I don't know how they feel now. The Italians were the most lenient. However, they did another survey of exactly the same sort by the same company, sponsored by various public service radio in France and various other places, public service in Europe. And he was considered more aggressive and just as racist, but no longer dynamic. So the only quality that he was given in the first survey has disappeared. And now he is at 86% and no longer 76%. So he has gained a number of points everywhere, but Italy, which was the most lenient before, has shown that Italians are intelligent, and they have increased his score, his negative score, by 17 points, whereas the others went up by 7, 8, 9, something like that. So that tells you what Europeans think of Trump, and some thought earlier that he was going to become more presidential when he moved into the office. But this was clearly an illusion. I think that this gives a fairly good idea. He's not the only populist on earth, but he is someone who has legitimized populism. He is giving them permission, I think, in a sense, to become more populist. And this is something that is sweeping through Europe with a speed that you would not have expected. A lot of it is due to the behavior of the Social Democrats, I'm sorry to say, the Socialist Party in France, the SPD in Germany, various other socialists who have dropped seriously to the point where, because of François Hollande, the so-called socialist president of France, the socialist vote was down to 6% in the last presidential elections. There was not even a socialist candidate in the runoff. There are literal reasons for people to have grievances. When you impose neoliberalism and inequality on countries for 40 years, this is the answer that you get. You get populism, because there are people who really are left out. There are people who don't have jobs and understand that they are not going to have good jobs and that their children are not going to be as well off as they are. So it's not just a reaction against the political parties. It's against the fact of inequality. It's the fact that the rich are getting richer all the time, maybe less so than in the United States. But even so, we too have our billionaires and our major companies that don't pay taxes. And so there's a backlash. There's an anti-immigrant stance. There's an anti-elite stance. And here I'll give you just a couple of figures, if you'll bear with me. In the 70s, the average in Europe, throughout Europe, was when you count the GDP at the end of the year, economists divided into what went to labor and what went to capital. And in the 70s, the average for Europe was 70% went to labor, working people, and 30% went to capital. And now we are at 60% for labor and 40% for capital. Now, that is the share of GDP. And this is not small beer, because the GDP of Europe, taken as a whole, is about 16 trillion. So this means that every year, labor is not getting 1.6 trillion dollars that they were getting before. And add to that we have austerity measures, largely, I'm sorry to say, because the Germans are a very important force in this conference, but it's because of Germany. I know it's not the same Germans, thank God, or we wouldn't be here. But it's because of German policy that is imposed all over Europe, which favors austerity, whereas we are already in a period of recession. So it's terribly hard for the European economy to develop and grow and satisfy people and create jobs and so on. And I think it's John Cavanagh who said this morning that we're imposing pro-cyclical policies. If I'm wrong on who said it, it's because I forget very quickly who said what in spite of trying to take notes. But yes, the Germans are imposing pro-cyclical policies. So if there is already a lack of equality and a lack of money to the people who need it and who would spend it right away, and that would help the economy to grow and to invest and so on, that isn't happening. So people have a genuine reason to revolt. And how do they revolt in a democratic or still democratic situation? They do it by becoming populists and saying, we're not going to vote for any of you people, and we are going to express what we feel. And this is what they have done, so that you have, in Germany, the AfD, which is a far-right party. It's new. There's been nothing like this since the Second World War. And in some parts of ex-Eastern Germany, they got up to 35% of the vote in some cities. Less, much less in West Germany, but still, this is a totally new phenomenon, to the point where poor Angela Merkel is not able to make a government. She's been trying for 2 months, and Germany is without a government. France is quite different, although some Anglo-Saxon journalists pushed the phenomenon of Marine Le Pen to an unreasonable degree and pretended that she had some chance of winning. She never had any chance of winning, and it just made a better story to say this was a real competition. No, the debate in France was, do I abstain, do I spoil my ballot, or do I vote for Macron, which is what I did, so that the difference between Le Pen and Macron would be as large as possible. But we still have a populist party, which is not very strong. The Front National is losing votes, but it has been there. It's been around for a very long time. But more recently, you've got all of what are called the Visegrad countries, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, and Slovakia, which have all got a very strong right wing. The Czechs just elected to the head of the country the second largest fortune in the Czech Republic. He wants to bomb the boats that bring immigrants. He has said that as a proposal. Hungary, you probably read that they have a completely right-wing government, to the point where bits of the constitution are being scattered. The rule of law is not observed. Poland also, well, the other two also very far to the right. Italy will have elections next year, and that will probably bring in a very big role for the Cinque Stelle, the five-star movement, which started out a bit ambiguously. You didn't know if it was populist or not, but now it really is showing itself to be populist. And the only exception to all of this is Spain, where you do not have a strong populist movement. And we have in the United States, we're now starting to discuss not just the neoliberal principles, but going beyond them. And I see books or articles titled "The Makers and the Takers." In other words, I've got money, and I earned my money, and I'm a self-made person, and if you didn't, it's your own fault. And I am the person who makes taxes because I pay my taxes, supposedly. Not many do. But you are the takers because you're getting welfare, or you're getting this grant or that grant and this, and I don't owe you anything. That is the new mantra. It's not liberté, égalité, fraternité. The other word for fraternité is solidarity. This seems to me to be disappearing. And that is what I I can't say I credit Trump with this, this shift, but now it's things you can talk about. This would not have been public in a country like the United States a few years ago. And I was very happy to hear Sano Tree speak this morning about how we lack a sense of continuity and of time. The eternal present is not a good place to live. The thing I fear most is climate change, because I have 4 grandchildren, and when they reach my age, if they reach my age, they risk living in some sort of wasteland. I don't know, I mean, but it's, to me, this is scary as hell. And the other thing is that the immigration problem, or whatever it is going to grow. And partly because of climate change, but for other reasons also. There will be a billion people on the move, according to some surveys. By 2050, there will be a billion people moving for whatever reason, because they cannot live where they now are. In Africa, in 2040, there will be 2.4 billion people. Disasters are displacing people all the time. Floods, record heat waves. The thermometer has gone up to 54 or 55 centigrade in Pakistan and Iraq. I haven't translated that into Fahrenheit, but it's pretty damn hot. What I would say to progressives, and this is where I want to conclude, I think that's about time, is that progressives, in the end of the 70s, when Reagan and Thatcher took over, progressives, I think, did not get the full point of this. How did they do it? How did they reach the point where they could become president and prime minister of the US and Great Britain? They did it because they were working on the basis of ideas that had changed. Ideas have consequences. And the intellectuals of the right, who I call the Gramscian right-wing intellectuals, because they understood the need for hegemony, cultural hegemony. They understood that, which most lefties did not. And they invested hugely, with a lot of money from armaments funds, Medea, the Owen, the Bradleys, and those people. Lots of money, over $1 billion, certainly over $1 billion, in think tanks, in publications, from everything from the scholarly journal right down to the campus newspaper. They invested in ideas, and gradually they changed what Americans think. And they had branches in Britain, and something called the Atlas Network has started branches all over the world. In Europe, there are think tanks that are now modeling themselves on the need for changing people's ideas. And I wanted to say something about what is being given to transnationals, and I'll do that very quickly, because Maud did a beautiful job of explaining IDS, but transnational corporations don't want to govern. They don't want the jobs of ordinary government and having to keep order every day. But they do want certain things that they go after in a very efficient way. And they are making huge progress thanks to this change of ideas. The ISDS is one example. Also in trade agreements, you have something which is different, which is the regulation, changing the regulations. They want to be present at the beginning when regulations are being made for health, for food, for any kind of activity like that, so that these things will be much more privatized. They are getting their gifts from the industries, the extractive industries, and the withdrawal from the climate accord. That is a huge gift to the extractive industries, etc. And So I think that if we don't understand as progressives what is happening and how we are gradually moving towards a libertarian movement, of which Trump is the symbol and also one of the major animators, then we are going to miss the train again. And we cannot afford to miss this train. Thank you very much.